Good morning. I haven't done a plant update, but after some renovations on my house, I finally got things in a good place. And since the only plant I have flowering right now is my plumeria, which is absolutely beautiful, I thought that I would start with that because that's a success story. Basically nearly killed my yuzu tree. I'm not sure what's going on with it. Um, it's always, it's never been quite right, even when I transplanted it and got a little bit overwatered and just completely lost all of its leaves and spiraled. So I could repot it, I just don't have the time right now. So I'm just letting it dry out absolutely completely and trying to rehab it with some stuff. I'm gonna make a video on that if it works. So, and I got my snake plant. But the most interesting thing is my orchids. I made some major upgrades to my plant shelf. So now it's 3/4 wrapped in vinyl to keep the humidity up and so that I don't splash water on my newly painted walls. And I'm really liking it. I've got some more just stapled in. I've got some more plans for that in the future. And then it's wrapped. I basically made in the bottom here, it's doubly wrapped in the bottom so that no water gets on the floor. And then I've got a tray system here that captures most of the water in here. So this is basically so I don't have to constantly take all my seedlings and other things to the sink. I'm in the process of getting the tray system going up here. I take all these to the bathroom. But while I was moving, my plants kind of suffer. Well, I had to move out of my place to get the floors fixed. And my plants, most of them are pretty set back. But I've got them starting to go again, which is exciting. The sad part is they're just probably gonna skip blooming. I missed a key time to repot my Walkeriana, so I don't know, it's like double the size of the pot. I've got to figure out what I'm gonna do with that. And that still might bloom this winter, we'll see. A couple of my more sensitive plants basically got overwatered with minimal light and suffered some levels of root rot. The worst of which is this Varsavixii. It's like just now gaining some turgor, but its new growth is just floppy and depressing. Well, its new growth this past summer, but basically they were in a north-facing window and they were being taken care of for a month while I was fixing up my place by me and by the person who's watching them. Some of the plants are just thriving, but unfortunately, they all seem to be out of sync, right? This is my Cattleya mossii, and it did quite well. So some of the plants got enough light, and they're doing great. But my Cattleya mossii looks completely out of sync. It's always been kind of weird, but it's got sheaths and new growths occurring way earlier than normal. I don't know if you can see back in there, but there's two new growths. Hey, this Trianae is kind of sad, and it's putting out tiny new growths, which I really don't like. But that's just what happens. Sometimes shit happens with your orchids, and You just got to pick up the pieces and keep going. But the vast majority of my collections I've been able to reawaken, and they're doing great. And really, what's exciting to me is that I've been getting able to stimulate new root growth on really old roots. Like this is you trace this root back, this is, a 2 or 3 year old root. And like I said, it's really frustrating because if all these plants had light this summer, I was expecting a bloom from this tree, this potentially triploid or tetraploid Trianae. But yeah, everything's kind of putting out really nice, new, healthy roots. This is my Cattleya persevaliana cerulean. Yeah, so I got a really nice flush of growth and roots from my Digbyana. So things are back, but they're just, I don't know, the plants are just trying to reestablish themselves, and I suffered comparatively small amounts of rot and death with the exception of a few plants. They're just kind of sulking and really kind of firing up that engine of growth. I don't really like how this guy just like bent forward, but this this Cattleya has kind of an annoying growth habit where it's just growing upwards on top of itself, so that just might be its genetics. Another sad casualty is just not seeing my Cattleya violacea bloom. It's got this empty spike, but I doubt it. Like it, basically all the plants were in summer growth and then were abruptly shut down by lack of light, and they were fertilized, but they need light, number one. But this plant still is absolutely thriving. I see it described as a warm grower. Um, I grow it in intermediate conditions. Mind you, I don't let it go below 60, so I think that's because they grow in my house. So I think that's the big thing, but it just has a huge root system. And every time it puts on new growths, when they send out roots, the root system just gets so dang unruly. I don't know if you can see in there. They're just starting to put out new roots. So I've read from like H&R orchids to treat it like a Vanda, and I kind of do. It's in a small pot, but it just has like 20, 30 roots, and they all grow out initially, and then they have a second phase of growth where they branch out, which is really cool. And like some of my other plants, I've been able to stimulate some new growth tips on old roots, which I really like because I think some people grow Cattleya and they just pretty much depend on the new growths roots to kind of keep the plant going. And I just don't think that's sustainable long term. And I don't think you can achieve as good of blooms with that. So I try and keep all roots alive as long as possible. And you can see, like, all my plants have massive root systems, and I don't like cutting them. I don't care if they look messy. The plants are just going to be healthy. Thinking about giving up on some of my projects. I'm still really into Cattleya schilleriana, but they are just not growing well for me in my environment. And I already took on a lot of bifoliate Cattleyas that have unruly growth habits, and since I have limited space, I think I'm gonna cut my collection down to just a couple. I bought like 4 or 5 just to see how well they're growing. This one's super healthy, but I don't I just don't feel confident that I have the conditions. I just don't even know. There's not a lot of good information on them about how to grow them well in English. So I need to spend some more time researching Brazilian videos and whatnot. And the same thing can be said for my uh, Cattleya tigrina, formerly known as Leopoldii. Uh, they're just so mad. I thought it would be really like I had this vision of having just like a giant orchid and eventually having like a giant like 10-inch pot that I would put in front of my window, and I don't know. I that dream is kind of dying on me. They're just huge and interestingly, and I have this issue with a lot of bifoliates. I initially was terrified of root rot, so I planted them. They're in a very airy mix. But what I find out is that it's really hard. Like, they drink so much water. Same thing with the Violacea, but I can keep up with that one better because it's got this little dish. And it actually seems to like, it's not semi hydroponic, but it definitely likes to, if I leave just a little bit of water, it drinks it up. But my two Leopoldii, I think I'm going to get rid of as well. Um, you grow your collection and you just need to make swap outs. I'm also thinking about getting rid of this Lotagesii, which I like. It grows, it's a bulletproof plant. The flowers grew out kind of messed up um, last year, and maybe you never know. Sometimes they'll get back. It's got a new growth, and like I said, everything's a little bit out of sync. So maybe I'll get some blooms from it. This was supposed to uh, this was supposed to bloom, but they're just when orchids get adjusted and they just don't like it. I just got some plants that are kind of listing. Um, Down here, where all my orchid seedlings are and some of my smaller plants, things are going pretty good. Um, they did not suffer nearly as much from the lack of light. I think just the bigger orchids need light to sustain themselves and produce sugar and stay vibrant and not rot. But like I said, 90% of my plants made it out, except for the few plants that have always kind of been borderline in my conditions. And those plants are kind of on a knife's edge. I also was having somebody watch my house while I was on vacation, and I forgot to tell them. They were watering my orchids just lightly, but I forgot to tell them to use lukewarm or room temperature water. So they sprayed some cold water, which really stressed out my Eclandiae. But the vast majority of everything is pretty thriving. This Hardiana kind of pooped out, which is really sad because it was really growing well and I really want a Hardiana. But pretty much the only casualties were my Dowianas, really. They're kind of just in stasis. This one got cold water damage. It definitely has a tiny bit of root rot, but it's okay. And this growth is stalled, but it's just slowly starting to pick that up. It's just not, just not happy. Dowianas have a reputation. This one is really in a bad place. The leaves are still turgid, but we'll see what happens when it puts out new growth. This one is kind of a surprise. This Dowiana, it's actually doing quite well. Even though it had two beautiful growths in here that just completely blacked and died. it didn't die back all the way, and it's put out a new growth, and it's reestablishing. I just set, who knows how far these plants are set back. But things are slowly starting to wake up and really reestablish. Like this, I'm really excited for. This is a Cattleya ludomaniana. Looks like it's going to be pretty darkly pigmented, just based on the spotting on the leaves. And just whenever I have a flush of root growth and then the subsequent growths come up, this might bloom in the spring, and I'm pretty excited about that. I've got a lot of good root porn going right now. I have this Cattleya maxima semi-alba, and it's growing a new growth, and you can't see them all, but it's got a lot of new roots growing. I'm really excited for this Cattleya genmanii semi-alba. I've heard really good things about this Cattleya, that they stay small and have a pretty big flower, and they're pretty robust. And this guy kind of was sulking for a while, and now look at it, it's just finally put out a flush of new growth. I got root branching on old roots. I like to see all of that. That makes me feel good. I've got this could be considered a compote. I've got a Cattleya hybrid. It's a Cattleya triumphans, which I've always wanted. But it's the Rosita form, so it's going to be reddish, which is different. Normally it's done with yellow and white flowered parents, and this one is the reddish form. And it's got a bunch of new roots, way more than you can see, new growths. It never skipped a beat, and that's, sometimes stresses on your collection give you some useful information about the orchids you are growing and the ones that are more resilient. We always want those ones in our collection that can handle stress, because there's always accidents. Here's a semi-alba varsavixii. I might just grow these out and sell them. I don't know how many of these guys I can even fit in my collection once they're mature, but you know how it is with orchids. You just buy them and figure out what the plan is later. More new growths on this hybrid it's a new hybrid I've never seen, Cattleya peccaviensis and Cattleya velutina. So I've got some hybrids of Schillerianas that might actually work well for me. This is a 4N Cattleya peccaviensis right here that's doing pretty well. It's got new growth. I just pulled it out of its pot and put it in a pot without media, and it seems to like it. It's got a long root right here. I've got some Cattleya walkeriana seedlings that I could probably do better on the culture of them, but I ended up, I guess this is just a video of confessing all of my mistakes. I bought some media from Repot Me that had charcoal in it, and I don't know, I don't want to put them on blast, but I had a couple of media from them with charcoal, and I haven't had issues with charcoal in the past, but every plant in my collection that has this charcoal media is just, it's not thriving. I have moved back to mixtures of bark and leca and pumice, and probably should have done this a long time ago, because there's a lot of people that I respect. I think I'm just going to move to lava rock for bigger plants in the future, just for issues with rot and stuff like that. And like going back to my point about maintaining uh, really old roots for as long as you can, because that's just extra energy your plant can get, and that's how you can get big plants and big flowerings. But yeah, planted these in a charcoal mix, and it had a weird flush of microbial growth. Um, so I put them all in a mix of kiwi bark and bonsai pumice, and I've been doing that now for my other seedlings that I've potted up, and they absolutely love it. And I'm getting some good root growth here. So I that was my old mix while I did it with perlite. I don't know why I switched it like an idiot, but that's what happens. And so I'm picking up the pieces on these Walkeriana seedlings. Um, this is interesting. This is a Cattleya labiata. Um, and it's got 2 new growths. And like, oops, just turned the thing to blue. It's got 2 new growths, and one is growing up right now, and it might bloom this winter, fall. It's not technically winter yet, but it will be soon. So I'm hoping I can get flowers out of it this year. Like I said, I have to just set my expectations. Like, this is a lost year. I just have to get all of these plants at least surviving through the winter and let them establish as many roots as they can for the new growths, because that's going to be that's going to be the key to next year's success. Other notable stuff back here. I have a lot of Walkeriana seedlings. They suffered from underwatering. So some plants got underwatered and some plants got overwatered. And they're just, unfortunately, they were on a pathway to thrive, and now they're just delayed a little bit. But they're sending out new roots. And new growth. So I just gotta wait for them and be patient. I've got some more Walkeriana seedlings that are doing much better. They just put out kind of tiny growths. Actually, all of these back here are Brazilian Walkerianas, or they're imported from Brazil via Miranda Orchids. Shout out to Francisco Miranda. He's got some great stuff and great collector's taste. And the Brazilian Walkerianas that you get, the breeding there is far surpassed what you get in America. So ultimately, these plants barely suffered from all of the abuse, right? Whereas some of these ones from H&R have great, like, some of the rarest color forms, but just something about the breeding lines of Harry and Roy, they're just not as vigorous as the Brazilian ones. And they'll tell you, oh, it's because foreign plants grow slow, and that's true, but these lines are highly selected for form and color and shape, and they definitely sacrificed a little vigor to get those. So I would love in the future to do some outcrosses with some of the modern Brazilian breeding, just to kind of mix the best of both worlds. Another plant that kind of just got sad is this mini purple that I got from Fred Clark, but it's sending out new growths, and it should reroot and then kind of pick up the pieces of this sad plant. And then I it's getting to the point where I gotta repot or pot them into compots or pot them out. But I've got these super special Walkeriana seedlings from H&R, and I'll probably track, just for my own purposes, to vlog them. I'll probably make videos as we follow these through their life cycle. They survived the abuse and they're thriving in this compot, which is surprising because they're growing in peat moss right now, in a peat pot, because that's how H&R does it. But learned a lot of lessons. I need to get my stuff out of this bad repot me charcoal. That's been an issue before the move, so yeah, I just thought I'd do an update on my collection, my system. I simplified the lighting, so now I just have 2 light bars and I have them on dim ring switches. So everything is a lot more dialed in and evened out now, and the plants are responding. They're just out of sync, trying to get back to their growth patterns, their growth cycle, and that's my fault. I threw them out of it. They still are like trying to finish summer and go rest, and they're just delayed, but everything's looking all right. Even my lone Paphiopedilum. We just gotta wait a little bit for things to kick back into gear. Anyway, guys, I hope you're having a good holiday season, a good winter or summer, depending on the hemisphere you live in, and hope you all are healthy and safe. See you later.